So we're talking about the importance of a holistic look at stress reduction in behavior therapy for dogs. And in the video this comment is from, we're talking specifically about changing the baseline stress levels when they sit higher than is ideal, leaving the dog with a smaller window of tolerance, leaving them in a chronically stressed state, making their ability to learn and create positive associations and to be curious and to problem solve be inefficient. And we were talking about how in this holistic look at stress reduction, which is so vital to the behavior therapy process being efficient and ethical and effective, how that also sometimes includes looking at activities that we are providing with the intention of them being enriching that may actually be working against us. So for example, this commenter is talking about when their dog is on a long line sniffing, which is a common activity that trainers and behavior consultants will recommend for enrichment for dogs. They say that around the 40-minute mark, their dog gets over aroused and starts nipping and playing with their arm. And so this is really an excellent example of where our attempt at enrichment may not have the impact that we're hoping that it will have, and in fact may actually be contributing to the trigger stacking, may be contributing to the over-arousal. So one of the things that we can do is look at the enrichment that we're providing and ask ourselves, what is our intended impact here? What do we hope to see as a result from this activity? And then we can see if we're getting that impact. We can see also what else we might be getting. And then we can decide, is this ultimately an activity that is serving my dog? And beyond that, there's often a lot of great information to gain, whether we realize that it is having the intended impact or that it's not, or that it's having perhaps an impact that is still positive, but we didn't expect it. There's often additional data that we can glean from that information to add even more nuance and individualization to our dog's management and enrichment plan and their training plans as well. And this is a conversation that comes up a lot around walks, games of fetch, sometimes personal play. These are common areas where I see folks engaging in the activity with the intent to support their dog's well-being, to bring their stress levels down. Although typically the phrasing we'll use is, get their energy out. And when we actually look at it, sometimes the end result is that the dog is actually more aroused than when we went into the situation. Perhaps we find that in this activity, they are practicing, rehearsing behaviors that we don't want to see more of. And so in the example of the dog on the long line who is becoming over-aroused, and again, this is an activity that is often recommended to help dogs decompress. These are often called decompression walks, right? And the idea is that on a longer leash, dogs have more agency. Dogs are more likely to sniff on longer leashes. Sniffing is a species typical behavior. It's one that typically lowers arousal. It offers mental stimulation, it offers social interaction with the handler, it offers physical exercise. And so for a lot of dogs, this activity would be calming. They would engage in the activity, and after the walk, we may see that stress levels are lower, they have an easier time resting, they're better able to engage in socially appropriate ways, whatever it is that we're using to sort of measure whether their stress levels are lower, whether their well-being is improved, an emotional change perhaps that we've seen. For a lot of dogs, that would be the case. But when we look at what's happening with this individual dog, we can say that around the 40-minute mark, we're seeing the dog go into those higher levels of stress. We're seeing those big signs of arousal. We're seeing unwanted behaviors being rehearsed. And so this is not having the impact that we hoped it would have. And then we can dive into that and gather data. So this commenter has already noted that this happens around the 40-minute mark. So what I would be interested to know is, what does the behavior and body language look like leading up to that 40-minute mark? Where do we start to see the dog creep up the stress scale? Does it start at the very beginning when they're getting the leash and the harness on and they stay aroused through the car ride, and then they jump out and they get more and more and more and more aroused? The sniffing gets faster, the weight distribution gets less even. We might see less sniffing altogether and more scanning and hypervigilance. We start to see physiological signs of stress. What do we see leading up? Is it a slope sort of like that? Or is the dog really relaxed? They get excited, put on their gear, they get in the car, they're able to relax as they're in the car, and then they get out of the car and things start out with lots of sniffing. The dog looks nice and soft and loose. They can respond easily. They're finding food easily. The sniffing is thoughtful. Fine motor skills are online. They're able to process information well. And then as time goes on, they get more and more and more aroused. And we can really break down that information in that in-between space to figure out what it is that is bringing up the dog's stress scales. Do we need to start way back at the house and work on lowering arousal in relation to putting on our gear? Is it the car ride that is overstimulating for the dog and they just don't have the skills to bring themselves down? Are they moving too quickly through the environment and aren't actually able to process the information that they're trying to get, and then they process less and less and less as their stress builds up? Are there triggers in the environment that the dog is responding to? Is the dog nervous outside and 40 minutes is like the limit before we start seeing this bigger, more overt over-arousal? So we need smaller bits of exposure to outside. And so we can use this data to figure out, where do we need to support the dog? Because it may be well before the walk itself, or it may be components of the walk itself, or it may be something that the environment tells us the dog needs support with. And so in addition to holistically lowering these stress levels, and we might in this case say, okay, so we definitely don't want to be taking walks up to the 40-minute mark. It's likely that we want to stop way before then. And there might be other interventions that we want to put in depending on, what our data shows. So for example, if my dog is getting really aroused, with the leashing up process, we might want to work on lowering arousal to those clues that we're going out for the walk. We might also find out, what is the underlying emotion there? Does the dog not want to go for the walk? Or is this like an overexcitement, hyper arousal? And then we might, when we're really going out, while we're still working on building that skill, we might take some time in between getting the harness on and getting in the car. So we might do some pattern games or some scatter feeds, or spend some time just relaxing in the front yard, likely in an activity that helps bring the dog down before we get into the car. So we're putting some space in there. Or it may be that the dog needs to travel less distance out and about on those long line outings. And so the dog may need to just sort of watch and stay in sort of, a 20-foot radius or so. I have my clients do picnics where we lay out a blanket and the dog's on the long line, and we just watch from there, and we play on off switch games, engage, disengage, our flight cue. We sniff around, we do scatter feeds, we do pattern games, whatever feels good to the dog and is appropriate for the dog in that moment. But we're not trying to take in all of that information while also moving through the environment and trying to process more and more. And so you can see that there's actually so much data to be gleaned and so many opportunities to support the dog by taking a look at these activities and saying, are they actually enriching for my dog? Are they actually doing what I hope they will do? For example, lowering stress levels. Is my dog practicing behaviors that I want them to practice, like sniffing and self-regulation? Or are they getting in over their head and engaging in behaviors that don't serve them, that their attempts to cope, but the dog keeps going up the stress scale instead of down? And we can really fine-tune this so that we get the most out of our behavior work, so that it is effective and it is efficient and it is ethical. We will be diving into all of this and more in our upcoming Behavior Bites webinar trio. Each of the 90-minute live webinars will touch on a different pillar of behavior therapy. So the first is all about that holistic stress reduction. The second is about the ability to self-regulate. And the third is about resilience to stress. So that starts September 13th. We'd love to see you there. And recordings are available for folks who can't make it live.